Hi, it's Dave. Today I'm joined by Angie Lau. She is a former Bloomberg anchor and now is the CEO and founder of Forkast News. They are a media platform that is covering all things blockchain, and they try to simplify the noise and complexity of blockchain, trying to bring it down to something understandable. And so in today's episode, I want to dive deeply into the world of blockchain and crypto, into a bunch of topics such as Bitcoin, Cardano, Ethereum, NFTs, and DeFi. Try to get a bigger picture look at what's going on here. So, Angie, I want to welcome you to the show.
It's great to be on. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thanks. You're coming, I believe it's from Taiwan, right? Right now?
Yeah, I'm dialing in from Taiwan. Our family's here as we wait out the storm called COVID-19. Forecast News is based in Hong Kong. We were born there. I spent my formative years, the past decade, here in Asia, and we're very lucky to be on that list of decentralized teams and distributed teams and companies that have business continuity despite all the noise and consternation around us. So, yeah, it's these are fascinating times, more so because of what's happening in technology right now. But that's something that you and your audience absolutely know a lot about.
Yeah, so I ran across your YouTube channel as I was researching Cardano and Charles Hoskinson, and I noticed a few interviews that you did, and I was like, "Hey, wait a minute! I know this person." And it all clicked with your former Bloomberg show, and I was like, "How did you get involved with crypto or get so passionate with crypto that you've created this whole company focused on crypto news and really deciphering it?" So, kind of when was that transition or that turning point where you're like, this is it. Crypto, blockchain is the future. I need to cover this.
It really, we're storytellers, we're communicators, and my first job that and my last will always be as a journalist. For me, it was really a recognition that there was a technology out there that I simply wanted to know a little bit more about. And that was simply it. We had been obviously, I had been observing crypto, observing blockchain, but very nascently. It was bubbling up here and there. Certainly, covering the 2008 global financial crisis. And obviously, it wasn't even on my radar. It wasn't on anybody's radar with the Satoshi white paper coming out in 2008. But over the years, this started percolating up. I reached a point where I simply wanted to know more about the technology. I felt that as a 21st century media industry, that shouldn't we be more thoughtful about what the current modern technology tools could be to help us do our jobs better? And it was simply asking that question of wondering, how could blockchain impact and be used in media for authentication, for immutability, for record, against censorship, against deep fakes, all of these questions that potentially could be answered by blockchain. So I simply wanted to learn more. And guess what, Dave? I bet I did what everybody does, which is you go on the internet and you start checking it out and you start looking for sources that could educate you. And what did I find? Well, I found a whole lot of fragmented, it just wasn't a whole lot out there. On one hand, in the mainstream media, of which I was, I recognized why we weren't covering the story. It was very technically dense. It was very, very specific. And so the only stories that mainstream media was covering were, Bitcoin prices going up and down, or, who got arrested that day. What's the latest scam? That's literally, and if you notice, that's kind of still dominating most headlines these days. It's changing, it's improving, but mostly still that. And then on the other side of the spectrum, just a lot of just a wide array and varying degrees of credibility. Some were super interesting. Most were head scratching and doubtful. And there was also a very big cheerleader effect, and it seemed to really cater to already the crypto converted, the crypto enthusiasts, and the crypto literate, of which I was still wanting to learn more. And I realized there's this huge expanse right in the middle of traditional institutional investors, professionals, senior executives, CEOs, C-suites, part of a global audience that were mainstream decision makers, that potentially could be well served by this information, but were not getting served. This was a global audience that I'm more than familiar with in my role at when I was Bloomberg anchor based out of Asia. So it was simply recognizing, wait a second, there could be more. The space is fragmented, and let's put some real journalism to work and deep dive and really suss out what the stories are, and the credible stories, the stories that are deep dive, insightful analysis, the stuff that we weren't really seeing. And that's really why Forkast was born. Forkast is simply serving, I hope, a greater objectivity into an industry that is still nascent, but absolutely is attracting, for very good reasons, a lot of professionals, institutional money that are coming into the space, because blockchain is already disrupting industries, and it's already forcing governments, policymakers, regulators, business leaders to reassess their logic and reassess their perspectives, and be forced to have an opinion about it and start diving in. So this is the space that we're serving.
In your view, like with blockchain and crypto, what inning do you think we're in? Do you think we're still in the first inning, or are we going into the second inning? How early on is this in the bigger picture of kind of history?
That is a great question. I feel like 2008 to 2013, people were still picking teams. It was still in the bullpen, right? People haven't even gotten onto the field yet. I think we are rounding out the first inning, heading into the second inning, and the fans are, maybe they took up the first row, and now we're probably 5, 6, 10 rows deep, and the mix of fans are changing. So while there were very specific tribes of different protocols and team colors, you're starting to see a real mix, because we're seeing fans of the game and the players on the field. And we're about to get into the second inning, and there's some serious money that's arriving. The rules, the officiating is changing as well. And it might be a whole new ball game very soon, to use your metaphor. And
Sure.
then some.
Yeah. So it seems like I want to take the top four or so crypto blockchains that I think are interesting, at least to me. So you have Bitcoin, you have Ethereum, and then perhaps edging up for a third space, maybe Cardano versus Polkadot. Of course, you have a bunch of other blockchains that will disagree. And it seems like there's so much noise around, like, what's the future of blockchain? Which crypto will win versus not, the pros and cons of each crypto. And a lot of it is very technical, focused, but it's hard to get the right info because everyone is cheerleading, pumping their own stock or their own, crypto, etc. So as more of an objective, person looking at this space, what's your take? How do you view the main players? Like, is Bitcoin, like, are you bullish on all of the cryptos? Do you see certain cryptos and blockchains as more exciting than others? Where is your eye and kind of focus going to?
So very clearly at Forkast, as objective editorial, we're blockchain protocol agnostic. So I'll just be clear on that. I am bullish on the space. I am bullish on the industry. I am absolutely bullish on this as an asset class. I mean, if starting a startup that supports this industry doesn't reflect that bullishness, I don't know what will. Um, I believe that this is going to define the new structure, the new societal relationships, transactional relationships, business relationships of the future. And I will count back to, Dave, you're a father of two. I'm a mother of one. We have an eye on the next generation, and at Forkast, it's a recognition that if you can't understand the technology that is shaping the future, you will never see your place in it. So that is that. So as a caveat, agnostically, we're taking a look at all of these protocols very specifically, but also very agnostically. I will tell you that I don't believe that it is a fight between protocols. Each blockchain, whether it be Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, you name it, IPFS, Filecoin, Casper Labs. I mean, the list can go on and on. Polkadot, as you mentioned. I do believe that there is a function for different protocols to emerge in specific enterprise use cases. Ripple, for example, and XRP, really creating that cross-border financial layer. Cardano, taking a look at how it can impact, in Africa and create enterprise solutions there for Fortune 500s. After speaking to Charles, who was very clear on that, to Ethereum, Joe Lubin, very clear on what they're doing over there over at Consensus in creating a enterprise support network that really looks to apply use cases for Ethereum, that I would say if Bitcoin was the granddaddy of them all and birthed all of these blockchain protocols, I would say that Ethereum was the first son of creating smart contracts and creating that smart computer connectivity that allows us to build contractual agreements and obligations to transactions as well. I mean, that just opened up incredible doors and opportunities for people. And so we've seen varying degrees of evolution of that. I believe that interoperability is actually going to be much more what we're going to see. I mean, we're seeing this from this part of the world right now. Forkast is based in Asia. We're very clear that a lot of the innovation and a lot of the movements in blockchain space are actually being innovated here in Asia. Why? Governments are much more thoughtful about it and much more bullish about it because of the potential leapfrog effect. So it's very clear to us from a business point of view, being based in Asia, why Forkast has to be here, and alerting, informing a global audience through good folks like you, Dave, to really open people's eyes up. And I will tell you that China is more than bullish on blockchain technology. Xi Jinping, October 24th of 2019, very clearly stated that blockchain was going to be one of the pillars of economic growth for China. And since then, we have seen an enormous role that government has played either through support, through programs, through incentives to really support the application and the growth of blockchain. How they feel about crypto is an entirely different story, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Their work in CBDCs, central bank-backed digital currencies, light years ahead, well, more like dog years ahead, but still significant when, we hear from Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell that, you know, a digital American dollar is still in the exploratory phase. Meanwhile, China has already gone through countless pilots and trials across cities in China to get ready the use of ERMB. But there's also something that they're building, and this is a little over a year old, and I'm sure you're aware of it, but it's still very much underreported, and this is the Blockchain Services Network. And this is a technology layer that is being that China is architecting, if I can turn that into a verb, that it is creating that allows the interoperability of blockchain protocols to engage with enterprise and government agencies. I think that's just really fascinating. I think that is how it's evolving, and so I don't think that people need to say one is better than the other. I think that you can probably cheerlead till you're blue in the face, but let the players on the field determine the direction of the game. And the direction of the game is it going to be used in real life? Is there enterprise usability? Are businesses going to integrate it internally into the fabric of their structures and of their systems? Is there going to be legacy system migration to blockchain? And I think right now what's holding potentially some back is the inability for systems to be able to speak to each other, because shouldn't we all have the right to kind of change our mind and evolve? And that's what interoperability allows us to do. So I think when we have a much more stronger layer that allows us, or if we see blockchain protocols create more on-ramps for interoperability, I think that is a game changer for wider spread adoption.
Got it. I'm actually fascinated by your comments on Asia, on how adoption and the attitude toward blockchain and crypto could be different than, let's say, in the U.S. Can you explain? I mean, I'm not that familiar with what's going on in terms of which countries and where the innovation is happening, but where is this kind of open-minded kind of innovation, and where's the most hunger for adoption happening in Asia? Is there a special use case that's kind of triggering more interest in Asia than in US?
So first I will say, Dave, I'm going to subscribe you to our newsletter.
Awesome.
And I would encourage your audience to do the same. And so we're eyes and ears, and on a weekly basis, we have a great newsletter that just kind of is a synopsis of what is really happening in this part of the world. But more broadly, our site on a daily basis produces some deep dives from a part of the world that I think, you should be more interested in. Just very quickly, I'll use Ripple as an example. So, we did Hester Peirce's very first interview post the Ripple SEC action, and she is an example, an embodiment of the bifurcation of opinion and perspective on blockchain and cryptocurrency in the United States. So Hester Peirce, as you may know, U.S. SEC commissioner, known as Crypto Mom, a moniker given to her by the industry because she's really advocating for the support and encouragement of nascent innovation and support by regulators instead of enforcement and prosecutorial action. And so she wants to create and support innovation through clarity, through regulatory clarity, and that's fantastic. And so that's one perspective, and yet she's also sitting as one of 5 commissioners on the panel uh, that voted to enforce action against Ripple 8 years after XRP was launched. And so we're still seeing that roll out in court today, and we continue to cover it very, very closely. But that is an example of the right hand not in concert with the left hand. And it's not that they don't know what each other is saying. Oh, they know, but it's just that they're not hanging out, and there's disagreement, and there's just a huge polarity there. And then take a look at China. You take a look at what's happening in Japan. You take a look at what's happening in Korea. So Japan, on Ripple, very clearly did not see it as a security, and it's supported by the government. It's supported by the business industry, and it's supported by retail investors in Japan. And so that is just one clear example of how there is a disparity of opinion. And if you're in the US, you know that the US is the gold standard. There's no doubt about it. But that is also eroding. I will tell you that when it comes to this technology, that gold standard in terms of enforcement is still there. In terms of the innovation, that is eroding, and it's actually happening much more quickly and accelerating in this part of the world. China is also a very good example of how, when you have a top-down central government, it can very much drive the bus wherever it wants to go. And we're talking about different systems. I think everybody knows which side of the coin I'm on that. Having been raised in Canada, and very clearly built up, and a participant in the democratic world. But in democracy, on that bus, good or bad, we got to ask all the people sitting in the back where the bus wants to go. And so you can understand then, when you have an inconsistency of vision, that can be a slowdown. And that inconsistency versus the consistency of vision is where things are starting to create distance. But I will also say there is a consistency of vision in democracies like South Korea and Japan as well. South Korea is a great example of how regulators and governments there are being are regulating and creating policies that is a little bit more well versed, because their citizenry demands it. Just a week ago, we reported that there was more volume in cryptocurrency markets in South Korea than there was on the main stock exchange. That's interesting.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Yeah, Asia strikes me as like much more practical and efficient in some ways than some other parts of the world. And it's interesting that some of these countries are, using the efficiency or practicalness. With China, I'm super curious. I want to ask what your take is, because a few questions. First is, do you think central digital, central bank digital currencies are inevitable? Will China release their own,
Yes.
crypto? And will that be used to infringe on people's rights even more? Will that give just more power to the government to control, more things? Or do you look at this more optimistically and somehow, it actually increases individual liberties?
So to be clear, I don't think that CBDCs are crypto. It uses DLT. It is not crypto because it's not decentralized. So it is very much a centralized digital fiat. There will be capabilities that CBDCs have that China won't be the only ones doing it. CBDCs, by its very nature, will have functionality that allows a central bank to enact its monetary policy and stoke behavior, and pull monetary levers in a digital way and much faster than printing money. Uh, let's not kid ourselves when we say that central banks, even though it's paper money, they are controlling it and you and business and your decision making, your financial, your money decision making more than you can imagine. And you're saying, oh, well, this is just a piece of paper. Well, you know, the purchasing power of your dollar today versus tomorrow, the ability of you to earn more money through interest rates or not because of negative yield, does that encourage you to spend or does that discourage you? Stimulus dollars, stimulus checks, all of these strategies that governments and central banks are employing right now, the countless printing of dollars to inject into a system that is propping up what we're seeing in the equity markets right now. 2008 was not that long ago. And even for this generation, if you were born, just around that time, uh, you're still experiencing a lot of structural weakness that was never fixed post 2008. In fact, it's just been a continuation. And some would argue when this Band-Aid gets ripped off, where and what can we do? And I mean, this is why I find having having seen the adoption and the use of cryptocurrencies around the world and blockchain, we're actually seeing the birth of a parallel system that is providing an alternative path to you and your money and to your future, wealth. So when we talk about CBDCs, there will be a lot of controls set in, absolutely. The quickness of it will be there. I think in many ways it could be very interesting in that suddenly we know what stokes consumer behavior. I mean, we have Nobel Award-winning economists whose work helps us understand why and how people spend money, right? In this way, access to that information is just going to be that much more specific. I mean, we're experiencing that right now in social media, whether we like it or not. That data is being used in a commercial sense, but the data and how we decide to use our money, that could actually unleash a lot of new insights into consumer and monetary behavior of nations within specific capital markets. I think that's really fascinating, and I think that that's actually really interesting and beneficial. Of course, on the other hand, what are you going to do with that information? On the other hand, what could you do, knowing what you can do, and specifically moving the levers of influence on a single individual? And that's, I would argue, happening right now in varying degrees. And so is this then going to be a tool that allows people and or governments, centralized governments, to do this more broadly? And to do this more broadly, well, it's up to you. Do you trust? Do you trust your tribe leader? We are in a tribe right now. We are all in different tribes, right? And do you trust your tribe leader? Some people really think that paying taxes is fantastic because it keeps my roads paved and my schools clean and full of teachers and educates my kids, and and it sends around the garbage truck that picks up garbage, or the fire truck when my house or my neighbor's house uh, uh, has an emergency. So many well-used cases. And or is it going to, people's secret slush funds? Is it being misused? Is it so we can have varying degrees of the outcome, but I don't think that before we allow the technology to provide us with opportunities to get our house in order, that we point to as the enemy. I don't think that that is intellectual exercise I want to engage in, which in fact we're very much countering that with insightful insightful journalism over at Forkast. So, but the narrative still exists, Dave. You can read it every day. Oh, it's a farce. It's going to go down to zero. It's all hype. It's like the tulip craze of 18 blah blah blah. It's there's just there's a lot of opinion about the outcome. I just want to take a really thoughtful look as to the opportunity of the technology application. Let's get our human house in order before we throw the books in the fire, or throw down our tools because we used it the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating topic. I mean, what do you say to the person who says, look at China with the decrease or the elimination, the future elimination of cash altogether, and with the inevitable advent of central bank digital currencies, you'll have the Chinese government just take full control, and they will wipe out all other cryptos. They will just dominate even further their control on people's money and freedoms. For a person like who looks at kind of China and crypto like that, like, do you have any words of, I mean, do you have any other angles to share? Do you have any kind of voice of optimism, or does it have to go that route, or is there another way?
Holding crypto is legal in China. China has always been about capital control. It is hard to get your money out of China. They want to keep their money in China and put it to work. It's very clear that that's a choice they are making as a country. And you are seeing the growth in that country as a result. Obviously, CBDCs are also crucial in global trade. And what we're seeing over the past couple of years in terms of foreign policy and foreign trade policy is the One Belt, One Road. I don't know if you've heard that. Look it up. And it is a trade policy where China very poetically retracing the geographic footprint of the Silk Road of its history and doing trade with all of those neighboring countries. Now, in global trade, the US dollar is still the dominant global hegemony. And so there is a transfer, right? I mean, think about it. Every time you transfer something, instead of the direct, I give you money, Dave, that $10 is preserved 100%. I have to go through 5 million middlemen. By the time it gets to you, what do you have, like $2.50, maybe? And yet that is predominantly the dis-ease of use right now in global trade finance. So when we talk about cross-border transactions, And think about it, in the simplest terms of Western Union. Like, let's say you have a relative in London, right? And you want to send, your son is in London, let's say, and you want to send $50 for his birthday, but obviously he needs some pounds, right? And so you go to Western Union, and then you pay a fee. And then there's a exchange rate, and you're not going to get one for one, because the bank that holds the pound and the bank that holds the dollar, they're going to take their cut out of it. And then your son gets a check. It's a check. And so and it's got to be processed. There's a fee. And then we have to like make sure that check also corresponds with this. And then there's another fee. And by the time he gets it, is it really, the dollar amount? He's going to be like, oh my gosh, my parents don't love me because that's all they gave me. Well, hopefully they'll know better than that. But you know what I'm saying. And and so and so we've got a system where that's happening right now. And China simply wants to use its CBDC, its smart money, to interact with other trading nations. And that in of itself actually does displace the perhaps preference to do trade in dollars per se, because then it's now much more preserved in a CBDC with China. So then suddenly it's more incentivized. We reported on a story and a new development where we have Hong Kong, UAE, and Thailand. So it's a MCBDC pilot. So Hong Kong has its own CBDC pilot going on. Thailand does, UAE does, and it is talking about the triangulation, what essentially is a system that sets up for ease of trade between these three sovereign jurisdictions. And hey, when it's easier to do business with someone versus it's not comfortable doing business, or it's more costly, you can see how this actually can influence future trade relationships. Is that a good or a bad thing? It really depends on your perspective. This is the world's second largest economy, likely soon to be the first within the next decade to come. Asian economies are already greater than the rest of the world's combined. That's already happened. And there is a shift in geopolitical dynamics that are happening at a faster rate than most people figure out. I would also say that, in America, there's also different sets of controls that are being enforced that are not necessarily through CBDC, because the US doesn't have it. And you're seeing it from federal agencies to to tax code to regulatory and agency policy, to enforcement and all of that. And I would say that this has been an incredible system for a very long time. But it's also a system I fear that many of us have taken for granted in North America, in the West, that there needs to be a more thoughtful collaboration of vision. And when you see genius is supported because there is a consistency of vision. That has defined Silicon Valley for a very long time in a way that nowhere else in the world has defined it. And we're starting to see that consistency of vision very much in blockchain here in Asia. I would also say that it's going to be, if you're afraid, if there's fear, if there's concern, I hope that it comes from a place of depth of knowledge and not just the headlines, because the headlines actually don't tell the full story. The headlines really do reflect the concern that legacy and institutional perspectives of protecting their own interests reflect. So I would just say that, you know, there's more stuff that's happening, and to be thoughtful about it after you've checked out various sources, of which you're one, Dave, of which I'm another, and of which there are many other sources. But is there something to be afraid of? I wouldn't say afraid, and I wouldn't necessarily convict the technology tool before it has a chance to show what it can do. But I would say that what China has done in terms of displacing paper money, that's already happened. It's already happened. It's just that the government is behind, and they're doing what they need to do in already a digitized monetary system that has been held in private hands for a little too long, in their opinion. And so they're participating in the same way that they're, the U.S. are, central command and control of U.S. dollar. And there is no competitor to that until really right now in cryptocurrency.
Got it. NFTs. So NFTs this year have been on a craze. The first tweet selling for millions, artwork selling for tens of millions. What's your take on NFTs? Is this legit? Is it a bubble we're entering into, or is this something that is just the beginning that's going to grow, into something massive?
I feel the same way about NFTs as I do DeFi. I think there is a new application of technology, and it's amazing, and it is fascinating. It is also scary, because now everybody and their dog is jumping in on this bus and saying, I'm going to NFT this and I'm going to NFT that. And it's really muddying the space in the same way that cryptocurrency has a potential to truly transform global financial systems by reducing it to a simple peer-to-peer frictionless transaction. And yet what happened, muddying the space with ICOs this and token drops that and an airdrop here and I think that same speculative nature that is jumping on the promise of technology has arrived in NFTs. There is absolutely real world use case that could be transformative in art, in music, in digital content creation, that really excises the middleman. I mean, you just think of the music industry. It was disrupted when, no longer people were forced to buy, full albums or DVD or CDs, with full tracks. They could just pick one. They could just pick the one song that they like, instead of spending $25 on a full, on a full release. They just need to, pay 99 cents and or free, as Napster proved, and Spotify is now licensing that and charging you $9.99, and you're happy as a clam. But with NFTs, now that is even, the record labels, no doubt, that have controlled much of the industry, and then returning potential wealth and royalty streams to musicians direct to fans. We've already seen use cases of how technology has really been transformative to people's careers. Countless musicians and talent being discovered on the internet, on YouTube, right? Getting millions of following before serious money came in and wanted to commercialize and profit off of that, right? That is that is an example of the peer-to-peer power of discovering talent and talent being rewarded for it. So that's what I think NFTs are. I am I I do I do have to say the stuff that I don't like is the the froth factor, the hype factor, because it does muddy the intellectual conversation of, hey, this could actually be really disruptive if applied this way or that way. Look, like I said in my latest letter from the editor and the newsletter, that change is never linear. It's never a straight line. Change is very messy, but in that mess evolves, something that it can become a new system. And I believe that NFTs right now are experiencing that kind of speculative hype. It's great because now people are paying attention. It's not great because it's also welcoming some critical attention before it even has a chance to prove what it can do. But that's just the nature of the game.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, with DeFi, can you expand a little bit on your thoughts with DeFi as well? I mean, last year it seemed like a breakout year for DeFi with tons of companies like Compound or Aave. And do you see a killer use case in DeFi arising, or is it still kind of people are searching for that?
DeFi is fascinating on so many levels. And I can tell you right now that every bank and every government is taking a look very closely in the DeFi space because there's just so much liquidity that are coming into the space. But it's also redefining what those rails are for the system that allows people to say, you know what, I want to be my own bank and be in charge of my own money and participate in a way where I don't need to go to a bank, or I can just do some really interesting things with other people that either helps that person or helps me, and we can generate future wealth together. I mean, that's the nice Pollyanna version of DeFi, and then it's what we're seeing, which is some of the codes are just awful. And like full open back doors, and welcoming hacks and do completely non-policed wild west, and yet there's a lot of serious money in it, and people are losing serious money. People are making serious money and people are losing serious money. And the people who are losing serious money are lured into the space because they have seen people making serious money. But those people are well resourced, they have teams, they have liquidity, they're this is wealth management for them, right? This is their job versus somebody, oh, well, this is great. I can get 1,000% yield on my X, right? And then think about all of the people who are participating in DeFi. Well, it actually is probably about 5 degrees more than the average person because you've got to have a lay of the land, financial knowledge, financial acumen. Obviously, you need great bandwidth, Wi-Fi, and a serious computer. And those things are not things that people who could actually benefit from DeFi have. That is not something that somebody in rural India has access to. But could they potentially be a future beneficiary of DeFi? 100%. Not right now. That's just not something that the people in most need of new decentralized ways to engage financially can actually participate in for all the obvious reasons. So this is This is why there's a dichotomy in the DeFi space. But I think what is also really fascinating about DeFi is all the lessons of possibility that it's teaching CeFi and centralized finance and legacy financial systems. I'll leave you with this. Korea, um, one of their internal state agencies did a huge, report, and while just a government agency and doesn't reflect or speak for the government of Korea, um, it did recommend that Korea should consider positioning itself as a leader, as a national leader in DeFi. Now, what does that mean? Potentially regulatory empowerment, creating a sandbox. I mean, can mean a whole host of things. I just think that there's just a lot of things that are happening in DeFi that we may see trickle out into how we future transact with each other.
Interesting. Do you have any opinion on whether Ethereum 2.0 can scale and really meet the challenges of scaling, and versus Cardano, which is touting itself as the next generation kind of platform for smart contracts? Like, do you see them coexisting, and or do you see like,
Yeah.
because there's a narrative like you have the first gen type of
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin, more store value, the second gen smart contracts yet having difficulty of scaling, and then the third generation kind of scaling. Do you buy into that narrative, or do you see something a little bit different, like a coexisting of all of the generations not really, you know, battling against each other?
Yeah, like I said, super agnostic. So I can't say one is better than the other, and I'll leave that to everybody else in the space. It's, we just rather be super objective and just point out things when they need pointing out. So read the tea leaves there. Uh, but but look, I do believe that we are in that phase where the winners have not been established. As we know, winners will always be displaced. We just know this. I mean, just take a look at how markets have evolved over even just the past 20 years. Did we even imagine that Apple was $1 trillion company and would displace this tiny little startup with, a founder with big vision and dreams, would displace some of the blue chips, and the stalwarts on Wall Street? Great if you did. I mean, you're probably a cajillionaire right now, right? Um, but but obviously the answer is these things are, nothing is predictable. If COVID-19 has not taught us yet that if you thought that was the case, think again. Nothing is predictable. There is not a straight line. Uh, things things are manifesting probably right now in somebody's basement, that is going to take over the world in potentially 5 to 8 years. You have no idea. Um, so, do I think that one is going to displace another? There's going to be a champion, and I think even some of the smartest folks, even Charles and Vitalik and Joe, will say, no, it's not a competition royale. It's not a battle royale. We're going to do what's right with the perspective of how we think we can be impactful, and coexist, right? Um, One system, I think, just generally speaking, is just not a good idea. One specific opinion about how systems should be run, just generally speaking, doesn't leave a lot of room for growth and innovation. But I've just essentially defined human evolution and civilization over the past 2,000 years in a nutshell. And so that should also then apply to technology. There is going to be a lot of talented people working on different projects and working towards different goals and perhaps the same goals. And I am a believer in co-opetition. We can compete, but we can cooperate. And this is what this industry does really, really well.
I was talking last week to a founder of a Silicon Valley startup. I think it's Replit. They do software coding for kids and other people too. But he pointed out something that was interesting. He thinks that, the crypto space, blockchain space was kind of so out of the box that Silicon Valley kind of missed it in a way. I mean, sure, there were individuals and people who got it early on, but generally speaking, blockchain and crypto seems to have almost transcended Silicon Valley to become this global, phenomenon. Why do you think that happened?
I think Silicon Valley got a little too insular. I think that that is such a bubble, that part of the world, and where once upon a time, that creatively, came from an alternative culture and a way to do things differently. I think we can all, and I count myself here too, we can all find ourselves in a gilded cage of our own making. That success, if we buy into our own success, becomes our own gilded cage. I think that in effect might have been potentially what happened, because the same people were chasing the same deals, that were chasing the same kind of deals that was happening, that defined previous success. So the definition of success was very specifically defined, right? But I will also applaud Silicon Valley right now for actually waking up and now, also contributing to protocols, to blockchain firms, to they're absolutely waking up. And I think there was a contingent of Silicon Valley insiders that also saw the potential, obviously, of Bitcoin and blockchain. So it's evolutionary. I wouldn't say that necessarily Silicon Valley ignored it. It's just that, that for a very long time, those teams were very centralized. But you have a technology that is decentralized. And so it has captured the imagination of global teams. So it's actually not necessarily owned by any one geography. By its sheer nature of decentralization, that has been defined more broadly. But yeah, I mean, Silicon Valley didn't miss it. It was right under their nose. It was born in that part of the world, for heaven's sake. But I think the very creators also recognized that centrality was exactly what they were rejecting. Mm-hmm. So whether or not Silicon Valley missed it, or by its very nature, they were never the intended audience.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Do you think the big tech giants will get into the crypto or blockchain space? For example, the Apple, Google, Microsofts, etc. If so, what room is there for them to play?
So yes and no. I think in terms of what we have seen with even IBM, for example, and a lot of big consultancies creating their own version of blockchain enterprise use case. I think that you are seeing a, a divergence even there that decentralized public chains are actually breaking away, and they have the credibility now and the consistency, and actually they have the talent because they can change code. They can, they have an entire global team of developers who, come together and decide that they're going to either, fork or change code or something, or evolve, et cetera, at a faster pace than, if you were three people internally in a department, in a thick corporate structure. Bureaucratically, you have to get buy-in from your senior manager and your manager, et cetera, and then prove that this is the blockchain to end all blockchains. Well, that's just an impossibility, just at the pace of how quickly, we have learned how blockchain can evolve, right? And the smarter people are in the public sphere. They're not internal on private teams necessarily. And if they're super talented, they probably see the potential for to work on different projects and not necessarily within huge corporate confines. So there's that. Now, Apple and Google and Microsoft, will they get into this space? I think they're going to get into the space adjacently. So, for example, Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, providing that support layer of interoperability and or access, to different blockchains for devs to create their own apps, or, and kind of be that middle layer that allows people to on-ramp to different chains. I think you're going to see definitely that. The way that they're going to get into blockchain is probably more internally apply to their own corporate structures, the way they do things, the way that they're thinking about maybe tracking customers and or redefining relationships with me as the individual iPhone user or Android user, et cetera, et cetera. So they're probably going to be using it. Whether or not they're going to be creating it is a different story. And I'll leave you with Facebook's Libra, now Diem project, now renamed Diem. But when it was seen as a centralized toe into creating a new crypto, right? That's when not only regulators got really nervous, but so did the backlash of people wondering, well, now you're in my crypto wallet, and this is really scary. And so I think that has also been observed by big corporates and big technology giants as well. They have politically much bigger fires to put out before they want to stoke another one. So I would say politically right now, they are probably much more happy to engage in adjacently benefit like that. But whether or not they're going to dive and say that they're going to create another public blockchain, I mean, I think that the contrast of that statement would be very funny to a lot of people.
I hear you. I'm wondering, Elon Musk has been in the news lately, the past few months, tweeting about Dogecoin and Bitcoin and many other coins. And Tesla recently purchased $1.5 billion of Bitcoin, just announced recently they're accepting Bitcoin for purchase of Tesla cars. What's your take on kind of Elon Musk with crypto and his role? Do you see his role expanding in the crypto space? Will he advocate for other blockchains and platforms as well? Or do you think it's possible he or Tesla creates their own, crypto or platform? What's your thoughts?
I think he's a fascinating canary in this coal mine of ours. And he speaks with he speaks without a filter, and I think that's what so many people really admire. When this is such a filtered world sometimes. I, but he simply is, in my view, a canary, and an interesting one at that. Tesla's and Elon Musk by no means was the first to put corporate treasury dollars into Bitcoin, and they won't be the last. But they're certainly the most interesting because of what he was able to do with Tesla, and grow that market cap very specifically, and his work with SpaceX. So he's just a very interesting person, who reflects on it and who speaks about it. Um, I, 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 I don't know if it's. I don't believe in fandom. I don't believe in the cult of one or the cult of celebrity. And his influence, in my view, is disagree with me all you want. This is purely my opinion. So in my view, I don't think he drives crypto or drives the market. He simply reflects it. And why people are super excited about him in this space is because he reflects a growing interest. And that's why. Whether he drives it, I would not say that he drives it. I would say that he drives sentiment because of what he represents. That he represents growing interest of people who are also serious and smart money, who are potentially also now thinking about getting into the space because he is a corporate leader. And so what he represents is actually more interesting than the cult of one. I think what truly drives it is really somebody more powerful than him, and that's the every person. That we have more power at our fingertips at a point in human history now more than ever than we have had. More of us, rather than the top 1%. There is just so much power at our fingertips. And you saw that with GameStop. You've seen this in the crypto markets. We've seen that kind of Reddit community and that drive, good or bad. We've seen the pump and dumps. We've seen the whales. We've seen the speculation, but we've seen it. But that also means that there's an enormous power at the tips of the everyman's fingertips. I would say who's really going to drive this north is the consumer market, the retail market, because they also reflect then as we grow up. The traditional and institutional dollars simply reflect a community of wealth. And if the community of wealth say, this is an alternative asset class I don't want to ignore and I want to include in my portfolio, well, this is why institutional dollars are listening and are getting into the space.
Mm-hmm. I noticed, for example, with Cardano, Charles Hoskinson is taking some big steps in creating kind of a community, being an outspoken kind of leader, setting a vision. Who other people in the crypto space do you view personally as kind of inspirational thought leaders, people who you're excited to hear vision from, and who kind of set perhaps some standards or some ambition and some noble goals for the industry?
I'm like a mom. I cannot name a favorite child. They're all fascinating. I have met most of them. I have talked with many of them. I have interviewed too many to count, and I will continue to. There's so many interesting voices in this space. Some of whom you may know, some of whom you may not know. And that's my job. My job is to find those interesting voices and leaders. I will tell you, there is a consistency. There are shared characteristics that are interesting to me. They are smart contrarians. They see the system without the filter of thinking that it is the end all and be all. They are intellectual about the problems that they are specifically solving for. And they have a grander vision that is much bigger than the one. And it really is community. That community effect is, I mean, you have a community, I have a community, and these projects have a community. It's because of a belief in the greater good, the greater opportunity to benefit from knowing more, accessing more, transacting more, interacting more seamlessly. So it's that, and I love a great visionary, and I have, and these are icons. They're iconoclasts because they have been doing something that they believed in, primarily sometimes single focusedly, and then other people are now understanding that vision and joining. But they're all iconoclasts to me.
Awesome. I've noticed when you describe Forkast News, sometimes you've kind of connected it to the role of kind of highlighting some notable projects, like in the field of a very noisy kind of environment where it's hard to pick out the most notable, or projects that you might not pay attention to but are very noteworthy. Are there any projects out there right now that really are captivating you that perhaps general public just has overseen or is not really paying attention to? Is there anything that you're like, hey, this is something you guys should think about or look into?
We're looking for those stories all the time. And so when we report on those stories, I think it really contributes to a greater understanding that it's a thing. I guess I'll just point to one of my passions and why we started Forkast in the first place is I believe that there is a real use case for journalism. And we recently did a pilot with the Accor team. And Jim Nasser, actually in your neck of the woods right there, Dave, a great person to chat with. But Accor is in the, I started talking to Jim when COVID-19 popped its ugly head. And he is in the patient and medical records business. And so and I just, I mentioned, I said, there's absolutely a use case here for journalism. And we just had a really cool chat about it. And then months later, after we did a piece on Maria Ressa, I believe she was Time Person of the Year, mentioned as that because of her work in journalism, and right now she's facing time in prison because of her very, very honest reporting on the current Duterte administration. And we had, certainly not only the victim of, how we in the West perceive as press freedoms or lack thereof, but also awful bot campaigns on social media that were relegated against her and the team. And, and Jim called me up and said, "Hey, been working on this since we last talked. It's called #NewsHash." And it was just a way to authenticate. And so we brainstormed as to how journalists might be using it and thoughtful about it. And all of these things are still in its nascent phase. I mean, certainly we're not the only people who are thinking about it. I mean, IPFS and Filecoin, there's certainly applications for anti-censorship and storage of on a decentralized server that have incredible use cases that support journalism. And there are other projects that are being in the works right now. So is that happening that a lot of people aren't paying attention to? Absolutely. But that's the exciting part of it. And there is no breakaway leader per se. But I think because we're all now starting to apply thinking to it, that we're also, back to co-opetition. We're also observing where people have had success and where people have not had success, and applying that in learning and sharpening whatever it is that we're building as well internally. So yeah, I would just pay attention more broadly, and whether or not I think it goes back to, if you're in this space and you are excited about a project or a protocol, ask yourself why. And I would really say strip away from the speculative, like, okay, well, it, rose, is it going to break is going to have a technical breakout? Is it going to break its resistance? Like, is it going to break out of its resistance band? What's its support level? And all of the, fun stuff that we talk about on a daily basis. And I would just take a philosophical view. And this is obviously my personal opinion as somebody who's not a prognosticator, but just to take a step back and say, am I excited about how this is going to be applied, and how do I see the business case for it? Do I see current application of it and or potential application? And what is it the promise of? I think if that excites you, then you should be excited about supporting whichever protocol. Whether or not it's better than one thing or the other, I don't think that we're in that space right now. I think we are absolutely in that co-opetition phase where if one project faltered, that we all learn as an industry, that all the devs go back and go, okay, let's take a look at the GitHub and let's take a look at the code and let's see. And you are just seeing, it's like medicine, right? It's not like this doctor is competing with that doctor. We're all learning from each other, and we're all going to be healthier in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Great. I want to take a step back and think about ask a philosophical kind of why question here.
Sure. Sure.
What's at stake here with blockchain and crypto? Meaning, imagine if, hypothetically, everything failed with blockchain and crypto. Every single project, every single crypto, everything just massively failed and crashed and never came back. Like, why would that matter in your perspective? Like,
Sure.
What are we dealing with, at stake when we're talking about blockchain and crypto?
I mean, hypothetically, even I think that scenario is probably not going to happen. But to your philosophical question, I think it's a good mental exercise. And I think that it is simply this. It is that this is an opportunity to redefine a system that really benefits peers and really democratizes the relationship that we each have to the global economy. Far too long, that has been in the hands and in the power of the very few. That that has been very restrictive and out of reach for most of us. And the system has allowed us in different varying degrees to participate. 401ks, your broker, Wall Street, buying bonds and stocks, right? Trickling down to the retail market. So we get to participate. And so you should just be happy with that. Those points of nullification, I think, are completely over with blockchain. And this is also the danger point, because blockchain and cryptocurrency is alternative systems that allow actually a more democratized relationship that we can have with each other, and excising, not even disintermediating, but excising the middle layer that for far too long has benefited off of and arbitraged off of our inconsistency to trust each other. That is the danger time that we exist right now. The narrative of this is bad for sustainability and the environment, and yes, that's absolutely true. But there's also real arguments as to how that's not necessarily true. This is just for drug dealers, and it's the anonymity, and that's also not necessarily true if you take a look at how transparent and how we can track every blockchain right down to the holder of the wallet. And if you can KYC the exchange, well, we know exactly who did what. So the danger is, are we going to explore the technology and the world that it can open up to us, that actually redefines power and redistributes it to a lot more people than maybe the top 1%? That's the real battle, I think, that we're engaging right now. And so if we were to say that, what if all of this never happened? What if we woke up tomorrow and it was all just a dream? I'd be super sad. I mean, I think it would be a tragedy, and a tragedy because of once was what could have been, exploring what could have been, and now no more. Yeah. And so even just the idea of it, I don't think it'll ever die, in that this idea is now far too powerful that even if it died, it will live on in the imagination and the vision of the people who hold up the spark of hope for it. So for that reason alone, I think this technology holds a lot of people's imagination of an alternative system that could be better, could be worse, but don't blame the technology. Let's take a hard look at ourselves and see how we can make it better with this technology tool.
Yeah, I mean, very well put. I like how you mentioned hope, an alternative system. Sometimes I look at it like an alternative universe, financial universe that has a completely different way of operating and trusting each other, taking out inefficiencies, but giving opportunity in a new way, a completely rethought, kind of mind-boggling approach. And it's super exciting to have chatted with you and to dive into so many topics regarding, blockchain and crypto and what's going on. This stuff is changing so fast. Every, month, something happens, every year. So I'm glad that, we have your channel, Forkast News. How can people find you? I know you're on YouTube at Forkast News, and you have a website. I'll put that also in the website description below. The newsletter, how can people sign up for that? Is that on your website as well?
It's on our website. Okay. Just sign up, www.forkast, forecast.news. And yes, a play on fork, changing paradigms, changing perspectives. And that's what we're doing. And it is a forecast. It is a forecast and a vision of a future, and reporting on a future that is to come, has already arrived, and is shaping the world as we speak.
Great. And
Thank you,
then,
Dave.
yeah, and I'll add
Pleasure.
your Twitter handle as well in the video description for people to follow your tweets as well.
That would be great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. And I really just want to thank you for the work that you're doing and the audience that you have. And yeah, I let's keep this community going. And I think that more are coming. It really is. I would say that at the end of the day, don't be intimidated by this technology. It is about transference of not only knowledge, but knowledge is also power. So, if you don't get it today, that's okay. Through osmosis, we all evolve. So I hope that you see us as a resource, and thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Angie. Yeah, best wishes to you and your team. All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, bye.
Bye, guys.